It was November 1965, the Central Highlands of Vietnam. Specifically, a place the locals called the Chu Pong Massif. We just called it X-Ray. I was a specialist 4th class with the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry. The first team, the same regiment Custer led to the Little Bighorn. We didn't talk about that much, but the ghosts were there. You could feel them in the regimental history we were forced to memorize, in the yellow, heavy cavalry patches on our shoulders. But we weren't riding horses. We were the test subjects for a brand new way of war, Airmobile. The Army had a theory. They thought they could replace the horse with the helicopter. They thought they could skip the mud, the marching, the slow grind of World War II or Korea. We didn't walk to the war anymore. We rode the skid of a Huey and dropped right on top of it. We were the Sky Cavalry. We thought we were the hunters. We thought we were riding the cutting edge of technology into a peasant war. We were young. We were confident. We had the swagger of men who had never seen a main force regiment in the open, and we were about to be dropped into a meat grinder the size of a football field. To understand why it went the way it did, you have to understand the ride in. It wasn't like a plane ride. A Huey with the doors pinned back is a sensory assault. You're sitting on the edge of the floor, feet dangling over 1,000 feet of nothing. The wind whips your face so hard your skin ripples. The turbine engine above you screams at a pitch that vibrates your teeth. We flew in a formation that looked like a swarm of angry wasps. Below us, the jungle rolled out like a green carpet, broken only by the brown scars of rivers. It looked peaceful from up there. That's the lie of air mobility. You feel godlike when you're looking down. You forget that the minute those skids touch the dirt, you're just infantry again. You're just soft flesh in a hard world. Before the shooting starts, you have to understand the ground. The environment wasn't just a backdrop, it was a participant, and it wanted us dead. The Ia Drang Valley wasn't a jungle in the way you see in the movies. It wasn't thick, wet rainforest canopy. It was scrub brush, elephant grass, tall, razor-sharp grass that grew 7-8 feet high. You could stand up and be blind. You could lie down and be blind. It cut your hands, it cut your face, and it hid everything. And the heat. It was a dry, suffocating heat, hovering around 100 degrees even in the shade, and there was no shade. The red dust covered everything. It wasn't like sand, it was a fine, talcum-like powder. It got in your eyes, your teeth, the pores of your skin, the action of your rifle. When the rotors of the slicks kicked it up, it choked you. We were dehydrated before we even stepped off the skids. The sun beat down off the Chu Pong mountain like a hammer. Just that damn grass and the anthills, hard, concrete-like mounds of earth. Some of them waist-high, that were the only cover you had. You felt exposed. Even when you were dug in, you felt naked. The mountain loomed over us. It was the high ground, and in war, if you don't have the high ground, you are living on borrowed time. The NVA were up there. They had been up there for weeks, watching, waiting, mapping every inch of that landing zone. We carried the future in our hands. The XM-16E1, the Mattel toy, black plastic and aluminum. It weighed about 6.5 pounds unloaded. Light. Too light, it felt like, compared to the wood and steel of the M14S we'd trained on. The old salts, the sergeants who had fought in Korea, they hated it. They said it felt like a toy gun. They said it wouldn't stop a man. I carried 21 magazines, 20 rounds in a mag, but we only loaded 18. You learned that the hard way. If you topped it off to 20, the spring got too tight, and the weapon would jam. That was the first crack in our confidence. A weapon you couldn't fully load because the spring was bad, We didn't trust them yet. We'd heard the stories. Failure to extract. Bolts seizing up in the dust. The chamber tolerances were too tight for the dirty ammo we were issued. So we carried cleaning rods taped to the handguards. We carried toothbrushes to scrub the lugs. We became obsessive about it. You'd see guys in the middle of a break, not eating, not sleeping, but scrubbing the carbon out of the star chamber of that rifle. On my webbing, I had 4 fragmentation grenades, heavy, smooth steel baseballs, 2 canteens of water that tasted like iodine and plastic, an entrenching tool that was useless against the roots of the elephant grass, and a bandolier of M60 ammo for the machine gunners. The pig, the M60, was the only thing we truly trusted. It was heavy, it was ugly, but it ate dirt and spat lead. The weight was manageable until the fear set in. Then every ounce felt like 10 pounds. The helmet strap chafed your chin. The flak vest was a kiln, trapping your body heat until you felt like you were cooking from the inside out. You sweat until you stop sweating, and that's when the heat stroke starts to creep in. We touched down at LZ X-ray around noon. The noise was deafening. The whop-whop-whop of the turbines creates a pressure wave you feel in your chest. The dust cloud, the brownout, blinded us. The crew chief screamed, "Get off! Get off! Go! Go!" We sprinted into the tall grass, flattened out, and waited for the bird to lift. When it did, the silence rushed back in, heavy and thick. At first, it was quiet. That was the thing about Vietnam. It could go from a picnic to a massacre in the blink of an eye. We set up a perimeter. We started to dig. But the ground was hard, laced with thick, fibrous roots that defied the entrenching tool. You couldn't dig a proper foxhole. You scraped out a shallow grave, a prone shelter, and piled dirt in front of you. We were operating on a doctrine called search and destroy. The idea was to land, find the enemy, fix them in place, and destroy them with artillery and air power. But on X-ray, we didn't find them. They found us. Then the patrols went out. Bravo Company moved up the ridge, and the radio started to crackle. It started with a few pops, distant, like firecrackers, then a rattle, then a roar. One of our platoons, 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, got separated. They chased a squad of NVA scouts too far. They got cut off. The lost platoon. Over the radio, we could hear it happening. We could hear the panic in the RTO's voice rising an octave. We heard the call for a medic. We heard the screams. They were surrounded hundreds of yards away from the perimeter, cut off by a sea of enemy soldiers. We realized very quickly that we hadn't landed in an empty valley. We had landed in the base camp of 3 regiments of the People's Army of Vietnam, the NVA. These weren't local guerrillas in black pajamas with bolt-action rifles. These were regulars, khaki uniforms, pith helmets with the red star, canvas jungle boots, and AK-47s. They had been waiting for us. They had practiced this. They knew that if they hugged us, if they got in close, grabbed them by the belt buckle close, our artillery and air support couldn't touch them without killing us too. It was a terrifying tactic. It negated our biggest advantage. By late afternoon, the perimeter was shrinking. We were taking fire from 3 sides. The noise began to build. It wasn't a rhythmic popping. It was a roar. They probed. They crawled through that tall grass, inches at a time. They were looking for the gaps in our lines. They were dragging away their dead with hook ropes so we wouldn't know how many we'd killed. They were disciplined. They didn't talk. They used bamboo clappers and whistles to signal. I was lying prone behind an anthill. My finger was resting on the trigger guard of my 16. My eyes were straining against the dark, trying to turn shadows into shapes. I had dug a small shelf in the dirt for my grenades, straightening the pins so I could pull them quietly. Your body betrays you in the dark. My heart was hammering against the dirt. I could feel the pulse in my neck, a rhythmic thumping that seemed loud enough to give away my position. My mouth was so dry I couldn't swallow. My tongue felt like a piece of felt. You start to hallucinate. You see movement where there is none. A blade of grass twitches in the wind, and you think it's a soldier creeping up on you. A bug crawls over a dry leaf, and it sounds like a boot step. You hold your breath until your lungs burn just to listen. The smell changed. During the day, it was dust, cordite, and the metallic tang of blood. At night, the air cooled and the smells settled. You could smell the enemy. It sounds crazy, but you could. They smoked cheap tobacco. They ate a fermented fish sauce called nuoc mam. The scent drifted on the heavy night air. They could smell us, too. We smelled like soap, tobacco, hair oil, and fear. We waited. The waiting is worse than the dying. In the waiting, your mind runs through every scenario. You imagine the bayonet. You imagine the grenade. Rolling into your hole. You pray. Even the atheists pray. You promise God that if you see the sun come up, you'll change. You'll be a better man. Then the whistles blew. It's a sound I still hear in my sleep. Not a scream. A shrill, piercing whistle. A shepherd's whistle. Then a bugle. A brass bugle, like something out of the Civil War or a bad Western movie. It echoed off the mountain, eerie and displaced in time. Ta, 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 ta. And then the screaming started. They didn't sneak in. They assaulted. They came in waves. Human waves. They didn't care about cover. They just ran right at us, firing from the hip, screaming to intimidate us, to hype themselves up. Green tracers from their AKs crossed with the red tracers from our M60s. It looked like a laser show, beautiful and deadly. The green lines floated toward us, lazy at first, then snapping past your head with a crack that split the air. The noise was physical. It punched you. The crump of grenades, the thwump of M79 bloopers, the screaming of men hit, the screaming of men fighting, the distinct heavy rattle of the RPD machine guns trying to suppress us. I fired until my weapon was hot to the touch. I didn't aim. You couldn't aim. I just pointed at the muzzle flashes and pulled. Change mag. Tap the forward assist. Fire. Change mag. Tap. Fire. Then it happened. The nightmare scenario. I pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. A dead click. I looked at the ejection port. A casing control. But if you watch the tracers, you get tunnel vision. Your world narrows down to that stream of light. You lose your peripheral sight. And in the grass, the death comes from the side. You look past the sights. You scan. You keep your head moving. You trust your hands to do the work while your eyes search the darkness for the next shadow. If you stare at the light, you die in the keep them cycling. The barrels glowed cherry red in the dark, a beacon for every RPG in the valley. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. If the pig went down, the line collapsed. That's when Colonel Moore called it broken arrow. It's a code word. It means an American unit is in danger of being overrun. It means every available aircraft in Vietnam is diverted to your coordinates. The sky fell on us. It started with the artillery. The 105s back at LZ Falcon were firing so fast the barrels were glowing. They walked a wall of steel around us. We were calling it in danger close. That means the rounds are landing inside the safety limit. We were shelling our own perimeter to scrape the enemy off of us. Then the air power arrived. Sky Raiders, Phantoms, F-100s. They came in low, shrieking over the treetops. The sound of a jet engine at 50 feet is a weapon in itself. Napalm, snake-eye bombs, 20-millimeter cannons. The valley lit up like noon. The flares popped overhead, swaying on parachutes, casting long dancing shadows that looked like skeletons moving in the grass. Under the flares, the world was a sickly, washed-out green. But in the dark, close is a relative term. Friendly fire isn't an accident in a battle like that. It's a probability. When you mix exhaustion, terror, darkness, and high explosives, mistakes happen. Tragic, irreversible mistakes. I remember looking up and seeing a phantom jet banking hard. 2 silver canisters tumbled from its wings. They tumbled end over end, flashing in the flare light. They were heading right for us. I screamed, "Short! Round short!" I buried my face in the dirt. I opened my mouth to equalize the pressure. The canister hit about 50 yards to my left. It didn't explode like a bomb. It splashed. Napalm is jellied gasoline. It sticks, and it burns at 2,000 degrees. The heat sucked the air out of my lungs immediately. It felt like someone had opened a blast furnace door. A wall of orange fire rolled forward, consuming the oxygen, consuming the grass, consuming everything. I heard the screams. They weren't enemy screams. They were American boys, a terrifying, high-pitched shrieking that didn't sound human anymore. It sounded like an animal in a trap. I lifted my head an inch. I saw a man, I think it was a man, running out of the flames. He was burning. He was flailing. I looked away. You can't help. If you go out there, you die. You just lie there and listen to it. You listen to your own guys burning to death because a pilot missed a toggle. Switch by a fraction of a second. The smell of burnt flesh is something you never forget. It's sweet, like roast pork. It makes you vomit because your stomach recognizes it as food while your brain screams in horror. The confusion was absolute. You didn't know if the shadow running toward you was a buddy or a killer. You hesitated. And hesitation kills. I saw a figure rise up out of the grass 10 feet away. He was moving fast, low to the ground. I raised my rifle. I took up the slack on the trigger. I was a split second from ending him. He shouted something in English. "Doc! Doc!" I almost pulled the trigger anyway. My nerves were fried. I froze. It was a kid from Bravo Company, dragging a wounded sergeant. He was covered in blood, his eyes wide white circles in a black face. If he hadn't yelled, I would have killed him. I would have killed a 19-year-old kid from Detroit and never known his name. That's the reality of night combat. The line between murder and survival is razor thin. You aren't a soldier anymore. You're a nervous system reacting to stimulus. We fought all night. The attacks came in pulses. A wave of violence, then 20 minutes of silence where you scrambled for ammo, drank the last drops of your water, and waited for the next bugle. By dawn, the barrel of my M16 was white-gray from the heat. My shoulder was bruised black and blue from the recoil. My ears were ringing so hard I couldn't hear the man next to me speaking. When the sun came up, the bugles stopped. The shooting trailed off to sporadic potshots. The NVA dragged their dead away, fading back into the mountain and the jungle. We crawled out of our holes. We stood up, slowly. We were stiff, dehydrated, deaf, and alive. The valley was destroyed. The elephant grass was gone, burned away or flattened by explosions. The trees were shattered stumps, white wood splintered like bones. The ground was churned up, black and red, covered in shell casings and gear. And the bodies. They were stacked in front of our positions, layers of them. The NVA had charged right into the machine guns. Some of them were so close I could reach out and touch them. They looked young, just like us. But we paid for it. I walked the line, checking for ammunition. I saw an empty foxhole where 2 guys from my squad had been. Just a helmet and a blood trail leading into the tall grass. I walked past the aid station near the termite mound command post. The ponchos were lined up, boots sticking out from under the rubber rain gear. Too many boots. The cost wasn't just the dead. It was the silence. We sat there, exhausted, covered in red dust and dried blood. Nobody cheered, nobody bragged. There were no John Wayne speeches. We just sat there, smoking cigarettes, staring at the tree line. We drank warm water from plastic canteens that had been flown in. We ate sea rations, ham, and lima beans that tasted like tin and grease. We ate mechanically. Then came the mad minute. Before we moved out to sweep the field, everyone on the line opened up. Every rifle, every machine gun, every grenade launcher fired into the grass for 60 seconds. Just in case, just to be sure nothing was alive out there waiting for us. The noise was incredible, a release of all the tension from the night. We shredded the vegetation until there was nothing left standing. We spent the next 2 days policing up the battlefield. The smell got worse in the heat. The flies came, clouds of them, black flies that landed on your food, on your cuts, on the dead. We gathered the enemy weapons, we gathered their documents, we gathered our own. I remember watching the medevac choppers coming in. We had to load the wounded. It's messy work. Chest. He was sucking air, pink froth bubbling on his lips. I looked at his eyes. He was looking right at me, terrified, pleading. "You're good," I lied to him. "You're going home, $1 million wound." I don't know if he made it. You load them on the bird lifts off, and they are gone. You never see them again. You just turn back to the perimeter and check your ammo. I extracted 3 days later. We flew back to base camp at Ankei. The transition is jarring. 1 minute you are in the 7th circle of hell, surrounded by death and flies. 30 minutes later, you are standing on a pierced steel plank runway, and there is cold beer and hot food. We showered. The water ran red with the dust. We scrubbed, but you couldn't get the smell out of your pores. It felt like it was under your skin. We drank beer. We slept on cots. We wrote letters home that didn't say a word about what we had seen. "I'm fine, Mom. Eating well. It's hot here. Love to Dad." But I never really left the Ia Drang. It's been decades now. I'm an old man. My knees ache when it rains. I have grandkids. I sit on my porch and watch the sun go down. But when the crickets start up, or I smell burning leaves in the fall, or the neighbor burns a brush pile, I'm back there. I check the perimeter of my yard. I sit with my back to the wall. I don't like tall grass. I don't like crowds. I don't like sudden noises. The history books call it the Battle of Ia Drang. They call it the first major engagement of the Vietnam War. They talk about kill ratios and air mobility tactics. They talk about it like a chess game. But for us, it wasn't history. It was a loss of innocence. We went in as boys who believed in the technology and the flag. We came out as old men who knew that technology breaks and flags don't stop bullets. You come home, but you don't come back whole. You leave a piece of your soul in the red dirt. You leave it in the dark with the tracers and the bugles. You learn that bravery isn't about not being scared. Everyone was scared. If a man says he wasn't, he's a liar or a psychopath. Bravery is about doing your job when you're terrified. It's about not leaving your buddy when your brain is screaming at you to run. And you learn the hardest lesson of all, the one that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. when the house is quiet and the ghosts come back. You replay the moments, the jam, the shadow, the friendly fire. You think about the near misses, the mortar round that lands in the hole next to you, the sniper bullet that cracks past your ear. Those are the lucky ones. You hear the snap, you hear the explosion, you realize you're still alive, but you know the truth. You don't hear the one that gets you.